morning, everyone. What I'm going to do is to walk you through some of the references, some of the descriptions of river Sarasvati from Rigveda, Ramayana and Mahabharata. Now, I'm not going to walk you through the actual specific shlokas, specific verses. You know, many of the presenters over the last day and a half have actually done that. But as Michel Danilo said, if you have a chance, we should look at the various sources of scientific disciplines and see to what extent they corroborate with each other. Okay, next please. Okay, so in scope for today, next, I'm going to briefly talk about the absolute chronology for these three, Rigveda, Ramayana, Mahabharata, from an astronomy evidence from these texts. Next. Then I want to briefly refer to the descriptions of river Saraswati from these three texts. Next. And then descriptions of Ramayana and Mahabharata personalities. Some of the historical personalities. We know the names Vasishtha, Vishwamitra, then Devaki, okay, and Shantanu, and so on. And how do they fit in the context of Rigveda and Mahabharata and sometimes Ramayana. Next. And then I will briefly refer to the relative chronology of Rigveda mandalas. Now some of you, or hopefully most of you, would have heard the name Sri Srikant Talagiri. He has done a wonderful work in doing the relative chronology of the 10 different mandalas of Rigveda. And we will see to what extent they all corroborate and come together. The next one. And briefly, I will refer to the problems of the absolute chronology that is proposed by Srikant Talagiri. But also, now Sri Michel Danino is not very committal in terms of the exact timeline. He gives a rough timeline. But I will also refer to some of the dates he referred to in his book, The Lost River, the great book. And I'll say what could be some of the challenges of the timeline that he proposes. Okay. And out of scope for today, so we will assume something. We will not have time in 20 minutes to do that, which is how I got to the absolute chronology of Ramayana and Mahabharata based on astronomy references. And how Sri Srikant Talagiri got to the relative chronology of Rigveda mandalas based on genealogies of the rishis from the Rigveda, from the Anupramana. Okay. So that's our landscape. We will look at the textual references. We will look at paleo-hydrology references, not the detailed research, but I will refer to the specific research effort. Then climatology, then astronomy, geology, and then genealogies of the rishis. Now that's a lot to cover, so I'm going to go pretty fast through that. Okay. Just go back one second. If you have to do a research, even Bhagavad Gita has advice for us. It says, Adhishtanam tatha karta karnam cha prathak vidam vividhascha prathak cheshta daivam chaiva prapanchama. You have a goal, Adhishtanam tatha karta, that's you, your ability, your excitement, what you are interested in. Karnam cha prathak vidam. We have to develop a multidisciplinary skill set. That's the star that I am showing you. Karnam cha prathak vidam vividhascha prathak cheshta. You may work on the same problem from multiple angles or multiple problems from the same angle. And Daivam Chevatra Panchamam. By luck, you may succeed. Okay, so that's the formula that Bhagavad Gita gives us. Okay, next. Okay, so logic of scientific discovery. It has the three corners. Think of that as a triangle. Go next. Go next. You can go 3 times. The 3 corners are explanation, prediction, and testing. Okay, so you can start at any corner point. Doesn't matter. But then you have to triangulate with the remaining 2. And then you have a complete siddhanta. Until then, it's a speculation. Until then, you have a conjecture, you have a theory, you have a proposal, but that's it. Next. And this is not something, of course, the modern science accepts that. You listen to Karl Popper, Richard Feynman, they will talk of this triangle. But you can go back to Patanjali, Yoga Sutra. Pratyaksha, Anumana, Agama, Pramana. And what is the Agama? Go next. It is the background knowledge. So anytime you are solving a certain problem, doesn't matter which area, you take a lot of things for granted. Okay, you assume. Now the point I want to make it is that you can challenge any of it Doesn't matter. You can challenge the background knowledge. You can challenge any of the corner points. But you can do this all together. You have to do one at a time. Tell me where your issue is. Now, I listened to the interview of Dr. Chaudhary with Ravish Kumar, and you did a great job there. And but you know, sometimes asking a question is the toughest thing. And if people don't know how to ask the right questions, it becomes very confusing too. Okay, next. So we can go three corner points. So what I'm showing you here is, in one slide I'm covering all my work that I have done on Ramayana and Mahabharata for 20 years. I looked at more than 200, in fact every single astronomy reference I could find in Mahabharata, every single Ramayana reference I could find, astronomy reference, in Ramayana, and then the background knowledge of precision of equinoxes, proper motions, modern astronomy, all the simulations, all the manual calculations. And based on that, I tested all of them and came up with these proposals. The Mahabharata Yuddha time I came up as 5,561 BCE, originally proposed by Dr. P. Varta. Rama Yuddha, I came up with 12,209 BCE, and I don't want anyone to fall off their chairs right now, you know, one way or the other. Now these are my proposals, and they are out there, open for falsification. I want people to literally take this straight to the pieces, you know. Be brutal, be rational in its critique, and tell me where I am wrong. And I would love to be wrong, because if you prove that I am wrong, which means there is a progress. Because the previous theory, previous proposal is discarded, and there is a new one. Okay, go next one. These two books, I wrote one in 2011, another in 2014. I would encourage you to read them if you are interested. When did the Mahabharata war happen? The second one is the historic Rama. Okay, first one talks about the timing of Mahabharata. Second one talks about the timing of Ramayana. Next. You can go through. And this is a quick chart for the work of Sri Srikant Nalagiri. Again, if you have not read this book, he has written few, but I would encourage every one of you here, in the context of Sarasvati and Rigveda, to read his book, Rigveda, the analysis. Again, he started with the Anukramani of Rigveda, and then looked at the sequence in terms of the genealogies of the rishis, and it's an amazing work. And based on that, what he came up with is the relative chronology. So the earliest mandala of Rigveda are 6, 3, 7, then comes 4, 2, then comes 5, 8, 9. And the last one, after a long gap, and he doesn't know how long, is Mandala 10. And Mandal 1, kind of, the suktas in Mandal 1 go all over, right from the old suktas to the new suktas. Go next. And that is his book. And actually it's available at multiple sites. Just Google it, okay? Next. Alright, go slow now, okay? So the first chart, I'm going to start with what I have proposed. So based on astronomy evidence, the timing for Ramayana, so upwards is going back in the past, Antiquity. And as we come down, that is to our time. So 12,000 BCE as a very crude one, remember, as a 13th millennium BCE for Ramayana. Next. 6th millennium BCE for Mahabharata. Next. And 2017 CE, that's us, our time. Okay? Go next. So now we are going to look at the epic evidence. What does Ramayana, excuse me, what does Ramayana has to say about Sarasvati? And also what does Mahabharata has to say? Next. So what Ramayana says is this. Right in the Ramayana times, when Bharat goes to his mama's place and then comes back, you know, you can see he's crossing different rivers and so on. And right there we have the description that Shruti or Satluj has already turned west. We have that description. We also have a mention of Sarasvati, by the way, in Ramayana. And then we also have already lots of descriptions of Yamuna turning east and merging with Ganga. There are enough of descriptions of that. So that is Ramayana time description of the status of Sarasvati. Next. And in Mahabharata, you have heard this time and time again in last day and a half. What is happening? Some places it has disappeared in the sand. Other places it's flowing very nicely. Next. So now we will look at the relative chronology of Srikant Nalagiri. So I'm looking at the Ramayana Mahabharata descriptions, comparing it with relative chronology of Srikant Nalagiri. Go. Yeah. Next. So first oldest mandala 637, next. The second set of mandalas 42, after that, next. 549, and after a long gap, next. The last mandala, mandala 10. Please pay attention to this as we correlate with other evidence. Okay. Go to next. And what does it say? I can't read it. Yeah, Rigveda. Yeah, Sarasvati descriptions. Okay, so go next. Yeah, stop there. You heard all these descriptions of Sarasvati yesterday. Ambitame, Naditame, all those grand descriptions starting from the mountains reaching the ocean. Do you know where those descriptions occur? They occur in 63742. The oldest mandala of Rigveda, oldest based on work of Srikanta. So we are going to accept that as is. You can challenge that, but we are going to accept as is. Okay? Now, as you go towards the last mandala, go next. That is when the Nadi Sukta that you see, 10.75, that occurs in the 10th mandala. And what you see is there is a reference to Ganga, Yamuna, Saraswati, all the rivers, including Sindhu. And there Sindhu is described as not necessarily the grand, but there is a focus, emphasis on Sindhu, and it is the fastest moving, it's the big river, and so on. So there is that transition from Saraswati as the grandest river, possibly down to Sindhu as one of the key river, if not the grand. Okay. So I wanted to make a connection between the Ramayana Mahabharata time from astronomy, the descriptions of Saraswati, you can go next. Okay. And then connection with the relative chronology of Rigveda. Go next. Next. Okay. Alright, next. Yeah. So yeah, go slow there. Okay. So now what we are going to look at, the first two columns are identical. We want to look at the last column, which is the geological evidence. And I'm in the company of great geologists and experts here. So look, a couple of studies or 4 studies I want to refer to. One is the very first, is by Clift et al. Clift and others. This is from Aberdeen, UK. And paper from 2012. He has written many papers. But 2012 papers, essentially, quickly I'm summarizing in one sentence, that he says the Yamuna separated from Saraswati as early as 50,000 BC, and definitely not after 9,000 BC. That is a high-level conclusion of that. Then the second work is by Frankfurt. Now this is done 30-35 years. Actually, Professor Valdia referred to some of that work, from this Frankfurt's work. Is the dry paleo courses of River Saraswati, or this area, were dry from early Holocene, which is what? 8,000, 10,000 BC, or even earlier. Now, where I have written that, I wanted to connect with the timing of Ramayana and Mahabharata that I have proposed. Remember, in Ramayana times, the Shutudri and Yamuna has already separated. Okay, that's the description. Go next. And then Michel Daninos, very good book, great book. Okay, I would encourage you to read it at least 10 times. Okay, and every time you find something new. Okay, so again, you look at his timing, what he has given us, the different research he has covered. That gels well with that 6 million in BC. And then everyone tends to agree that Saraswati dried up around 2000 BC. Okay, next. Alright, so we'll start with this. And in Talagiri's chronology again, yeah, we can go through that with that particular column. So same sequence, nothing new here. The last column, what I want to talk about is the personalities in Rigveda. So if you look at mandala 63742, that earliest mandala, do you know who are the rishis? Anyone? Or you can take a guess or read on the chart. Most of those mandalas are by Vishwamitra, Vasishtha, and of course many other rishis. But that is the time of those rishis composing those mandalas. Okay, go next. And then when you come to the 10th mandala, now it is not so much the rishi, but isn't it interesting that in Rigveda we find mention, many of you already know about this, mention of Shantanu and Devapi. Now you know who they are. Who is Shantanu? And ancestors of Pandavas, just a couple of generations, right? Before Bhishma. So you may see the reference of Shantanu and Devapi very clear, that is in the 10th mandal. So again, look at the chronology sequence, the 10th is the last mandal, and it's contemporary with Mahabharata. Now why is that? We know the answer actually. So now if you look at the Ramayana and Mahabharata personalities, what do we find? 637, the oldest mandalas, again I said, they are composed by Vishwamitra and Vasishtha. Now when I say Vishwamitra and Vasishtha, it's not just one rishi. Even Vasishtha is not just one rishi. They are descendants. There are many of them, and you can see their descendants writing afterwards. Same thing for Vishwamitra. What is interesting, I wrote down the name Trishanku. That is for a reason. I have also, go next one, come up with the references from various places related to Trishanku, from Ramayana, but also from Mahabharata, and have shown that the Trishanku, Vishwamitra, the whole story, also Vishwamitra creating Pratisrushti with Shravan Nakshatra as a starting point, all of that can be corroborated, can be established, can be shown to be the timing of 13,000 BCE. And so that is again that timing of Trishanku. And then you come down to Mahabharata times. What is interesting, I already referred to Shantanu and Devaki, who are Mahabharata characters. They are already into the 10th mandala. And how did they appear there? Well, we know Vedas recasted, edited the Vedas. What we have today, the 10th mandala and so on, they are from the recasted, edited by Vedas. And you see the reference in Mahabharata Adi Parva, Vedas doing that. Essentially classifying the Vedas into recasting it, re-editing it. And so what we have, so we should be surprised if a Mahabharata reference shows up in Rigveda. Okay, next. And then I want, go first two columns. So what I want to show you here is everything same, except I have added the data. This is based on climatological research work of many researchers. Michel Danino referred to it yesterday. It is in his book and so on, which is the intensification of monsoon. And there are so many references. I mean, I have more than 60 references on this intensification of monsoon. The time has changed, but sometime around 8,000 BC, somewhere there, down to 4,000, 3,000 BC. Okay, so that's the geological landscape we have, or climatological landscape we have. And against that, I want to go next. Just go. Yeah. No. Go back. One more. Yeah. So here I want to briefly refer to the problem of absolute chronology of Shrikant Talagiri. So as far as relative chronology, I am in complete agreement with him. Not agree because just it happens to agree with me, but I tried to find holes into his arguments. I did that for the last 10 years, by the way, and I couldn't find any, at least with my limited knowledge. But when it comes to absolute chronology, and he did not refer to absolute chronology in this book, but then when he wrote his last book, the Avesta and the Final Evidence, he did go for the absolute chronology. And the absolute chronology for Rigveda that he refers to is 3400 BCE to 1400 BCE. And there is it's not a problem of evidence. Actually, he started with the Mitanni evidence, I won't go into it, but it is the problem of logic. The modus ponens, I won't go into that, ponens and modus tollens, the logic, Tarkashastra, how we come to a certain conclusion. And I have had correspondence with him, and we remain at the respectful differences, and that may be another topic. But now just take his timeline, 3400 BCE to 1400 BCE, against the geological evidence, against the relative chronology evidence, and against the astronomy evidence, the timeline that I have proposed, that 3400 BCE to 1400 BCE doesn't fit well. Now, go next. Now, Michel Danino, he's not committed on fixed dates. He doesn't get into, he talks about the existence of Sarasvati and flourishing of Sarasvati. Not so much when exactly Rigveda was written, not so much when Mahabharata happened and when Ramayana happened. Even then, if you read his second chapter, I think the book, the Mighty River, then he asks us to take an imaginary ride along Saraswati. He says, okay, the ice age has come to an end, okay, around 10,000, 12,000 BC. So imagine a time of 8,000 BC, and now we start from Adi Badri somewhere there, okay? So indirectly, he refers to this timeline of 8,000 BC down to river drying up completely, so 2,000 BC. And I want to assert that even that timeline, he's not again committal about it, but even that timeline, if we assume that, it doesn't gel well, because Ramayana, based on my astronomy evidence, already is above that. So where is Rigveda? As far as the Rigveda that we have today, and taking the reference of vast recasting or editing it, is around 6 millennium BC when it's attained its final form, the one way we have it. But as far as the older mandalas of Rigveda goes, we really don't know. But Ramayana also refers to Rigveda, Mahabharata also refers to some form it existed before 13 million BC, and it can go as far back as we can imagine until some other evidence comes to light that allows us to put some kind of upper limit. Next. So I want to leave you with this thought. What happens is everybody conducts research in a certain discipline, and then over time, certain timelines, if it's when or if it's where, certain locations gets established in our mind, and we almost say, okay, finally we found it. But you know what? This whole game of science is not with any specific end. At any point, you can go back and challenge the existing notion. Not challenge for the sake of it, but in the light of new evidence that crops up. And any existing theory can basically be thrown out and might be replaced by a better theory. And that is how it leads to progress. And that's what we would like to do. So I encourage all of you to look at this work, the book of Chronology, my couple of words, some of the geological evidence, and the geology expert. I would encourage you to look at this and tell me where I might have gone wrong in terms of research work of Clift or Frankfurt or Mr. Daniel's work and others. Thank you.
Thank you, Nilesh. Thank you. मेरा अनुरोध है उपस्थित विद्वानों से, बहुत ही थॉट प्रोवोकिंग सब्जेक्ट उन्होंने डिस्कस किया है। आप इस पर प्रश्न पूछिए, क्योंकि यही वो विषय है जिसकी वजह से हम ठीक से सरस्वती की क्रोनोलॉजी को नहीं समझ पाते। तो विद्वान बैठे हैं बहुत सारे, और साइंस के बड़े
Well, I must congratulate you for this thought-provoking presentation, but I have one small question. You mentioned that the Yamuna started splitting from Sarasvati around 50,000 BC. What was the fate of Shatudri? When did it separate out from the Sarasvati?
Okay, again, I'll go back to work of Clift and others. So specifically Yamuna, he definitely says 50,000 BC looks more promising. With Shatudri, the picture is a bit murky, and again, the timeline may be similar. The reason it's murky is Shatudri has changed its path a lot more times than Yamuna. And so their work is based on the zirconium crystals, the uranium-laid zirconium crystals, and then mass spectrometry. So what happens is certain thing might have been deposited now, but after thousands of years, another lot of those same crystals show up, and then you don't know how to separate between the two unless you find some other evidence. So the picture is murky. And Shatudri, the name itself also, somebody mentioned yesterday that taking different branches and so on and so forth. So that's why the picture is murky. But if you go back to my timeline of Ramayana, 13 million BC, and Ramayana clearly refers to Shatudri turning west. Now, what we don't know is whether there are other branches of Shatudri that were still coming to Sarasvati. And it does mention Sarasvati. Mahabharata mentions Sarasvati too. Does that answer your question, sir? Does that answer your question?
Yes, I want to just information that what is the basis of Clift geological evidences?
What is the basis?
Is it dating or certain isotopes?
Yeah, now you are the expert, I know. So,
I have not gone through the paper, so
okay, yeah. So what he has looked at, again, yesterday we talked about those hard crystals. So it's a uranium-laid zirconium crystal. From so that gives the again the hypothesis being when they were Himalayan-fed rivers, high Himalayan-fed rivers, a certain types of crystals should be seen, and what layers in their bed, in their ancient beds.
No, it cannot be. It cannot be the isotope of the
No, I think it's isotope.
There's a paper by Clift wherein he has worked out the fan sediments, deep fan sediments, and on the basis of the fan sediments that have been deposited in the Bay of Bengal, he has interpreted the ages, and on the basis of those ages, he has said that he has determined the isotope ages of the core sediments that you can look up at.
Yeah, but we can take that offline. I mean, we need to move on. But any quick
Because uranium certainly it's not uranium. Uranium half lifetime is 2 1.
No,
It
no,
cannot be for this.
none of that we can lift a paper there for the chat.
Oh, very good. Amazing paper. Amazing. 3-4 papers.
तो actually थोड़ी सी problem ये है कि since he is not a subject person, तो उसके अंदर थोड़ा सा
And we can talk offline. I mean, I can show you the paper on that.
but it was a nice.
Very nice paper.
Nilesh, we had ongoing discussion about the actual chronology of Kurukshetra war and other things. So it's good thing that both of us are in the out of India camp. So I'm also very admirer of Srikanth Algiri, this one.
Yeah.
So only one question, and we will have this discussion continued. One question is that you mentioned about the chronology of Talagiri doesn't match with archaeoastronomical datings. So
The chronology of Talagiri
yes.
doesn't agree.
Agree with the datings, like what some of the dating that you have given
Yes.
for Mahabharata. It is actually in category of archaeoastronomical dating, right, based on the planetarium software. So
Ignore the software. It has nothing to do with the software, but it's archaeoastronomy.
archaeoastronomy. So in the archaeoastronomy itself, we have a lot of other dates, like for example, Dr. Achar's date of 3067 BC.
Yeah.
Kurukshetra war.
Yeah.
So that what I'm saying is in the same species of observations and in the same category of archaeoastronomy itself, there are dates which are matching with Algeri's dating.
Correct.
So what is your take on
Okay. Very good question. So for quickly I'll repeat. So there are in the archaeoastronomy, like I gave you my dates. Just Mahabharata, there are more than 130 different claims by those many different researchers for the timing of Mahabharata, and they range from 500 BC to 7300 BC. Out of that 130, about 50%, like around 60 or so, claim, just like me, that they are using the astronomy evidence, and so that's what Ravi is referring to. So there is Professor Achar, and it matches with Srikanth Alagiri. First thing, it doesn't match with Srikanth Alagiri.
Bhatnagar is 2000 BC.
What is it?
Bhatnagar is also doing
Okay, hold on. We'll just take a quick one. So it doesn't. So whatever Professor Achar gave, it doesn't match with Srikanth Alagiri, by the way, just for your information. But whether it matches or not, the point is. So your question is, what do we do with it, or how do I respond to the fact that they match?
Yes.
Okay. So I will take both just quickly, which is not going to the details. But I have written 10-part series, and it's on my blog. So anyone interested, go to Google Nilesh Oak, you'll get to the blog. I have written a 10-part series critiquing the claim of Professor Achar. Okay. So to answer your question, all these archaeoastronomers that claim that they have come up with Mahabharata date, they don't use same evidence. They in fact don't use all the evidence. My claim is I'm the only one who is using all the evidence 215. They use, Acharya uses only 12 out of 250. Okay, so that can
Bhatnagar is using.
we have a great scientist. We can relate to that. If you randomly or selectively pick some data, it will lead you to the wrong conclusion.
Bhatnagar is little more lower. He's giving a date of 1800.
Again, I'm not aware of Bhatnagar, and there are many claims, and we can talk offline about it. But again, have they used all the claims? And that's a great discussion to have.
First of all, I must congratulate you for a wonderful presentation, and would like, as a convener, would like to thank you for accepting our invitation to come here. I don't have a question, but I have a suggestion, and that suggestion is from the limited knowledge I have. Maybe I'm wrong. The fact is that I have understood that when we talk about Rigveda, we are treating it, there's what I understand, there's a basic fallacy in our understanding of that. We consider it as a document. Whereas when I talk to many persons associated with it, I realize that Rigveda is not a document at all. It is something that which seers, when they were in a very high meditative state, they could learn about what was going on in some other dimension, and that they interpreted. And the fact is that even today, people who are in highly meditative state, they are able to, with their eyes closed, they are able to discern all the mantras of Rigveda. So somewhere we have to consider that when we are talking about the age of Rigveda, we have to just get rid of our Western ideas that every book has a copyright date and a date of printing and something like that.
Right.
So we are talking of time immemorial, and we are talking of a gray area which is to be understood with a